Hey guys, I recently Dockerized one of our API projects by adding a Docker file. As you see, there's nothing secretive here. All we're doing is like getting an Maven image with JDK11, copying POM, copy source file, like very simple stuff. Nothing secretive going on here. And then I realized that long back I read something about something called dockerignore file. I'm sure most of you would have heard about gitignore file, which helps in ignoring certain artifacts that we do not want to version control. For example, anything which is coming from .idea, anything that's coming from target. But I'm not sure if you would be aware of what dockerignore is or how it basically improves your Docker images. So there's a very good article which I first read, and I will share this in the description of the video that I'm going to post on YouTube, so you can go through it, and it explains what Docker build context is, why we should have dockerignore files, and how it can make a difference. So I tried to play around with it, and I was very surprised to see that the build context that I was sending without Docker context, and when I add dockerignore, there's a huge difference. And let me just show you by giving an example. So let's say if I try to create an image from this file, like right now, without adding a dockerignore file, let's build an image, right? So Docker image build, I'm tagging it to name of a project. Context is the context of this project, and the file is Dockerfile. If I enter, it built the image, and as you can see, if you look at this value, it's 16.35 megabytes, which is not too much, but also not too less. And let's see what happens if we try to add a dockerignore file. So this has got, you first have to put a dot, and then you just say dockerignore, and that's how you add it. And let's see if you only try to let's say ignore the .git repository, which basically contains all our versions, which is not what you want to pass on to Docker. So let's say if we say ignore .git and maybe also .cache folders, and let's add .git, let's put it down, and cache, right? And let's see what happens if I try to run the same command again. Just to recall, the earlier build context was 16.35 megabytes. If I run it again, I was so surprised when I looked at this number. From 15 it had come down to, like from 16 it has come down to 5.237 megabytes. So already 2/3 of data that we did not need is gone. So that's awesome. If I again now try to ignore all target files, because we're going to run our Maven clean test by creating a container from it, let's see what happens, right? And if I run it again, so now we have from 16 megabytes, now it was 5 megabytes. And if I run it again, you see the context has now changed from 5 megabytes to 4 megabytes. So let's continue the trend, and let's try to ignore all the files and folders that we don't need. So for example, I can see we don't need .idea folder, we don't need .settings folder, and we don't need .vs code folder. Let's run again and see, by ignoring these 3 folders, how much is the context now. So the last context was 4 MB. If I run again, the context is reduced to 3.736 MB. Some benefits, not too much. Let's also ignore these drawings and images, which are just some files that I added to give some overview about how the high level design looks like and stuff like that, which is not needed for anything for runtime. So let's ignore drawings, let's ignore images, and if we try to run it again, the context has dramatically come down to 555 kilobytes. If you look at the number that we had before, it was I think if we come down somewhere here, 16.35 megabytes to 555 kilobytes. This is huge, right? This is like, I don't know, 32 times less context that we are sending to build an image. So, and what you would have also realized is the commands went super fast. So instead of taking a lot of time to, build all the files from this repository to create a Docker image, now, we are only passing what we really need. And I think if we also ignore more files, like we know that we don't need, for example, this editor config file, we don't need dot factory path, we don't need dot get attributes, we don't need get ignore, we even don't need this docker compose files. So let's say if I do refactor, rename, control C, let's go back, and we also don't need docker compose test file. We can keep the license. There are articles that say you can ignore Dockerfile. There are articles that say you should keep Dockerfile. I would like to keep Dockerfile so that if somebody wants to see, how we build our image, so let's not ignore this. We can also keep the license. If you want, you can also ignore the readme.md file, but it's a choice. Normally it is said that in runtime you are not intended in doing anything with the readme file, so you can also ignore it. So it's like we have pretty much ignored everything except our source file and our POM file and our Docker file. So let's do a final run and let's see how much context have we reduced. From 555 KB, now it has come down to 517 KB. I think the point is made, right? So anytime you have to build a image from a Docker file, try to add this dockerignore file. I think it will make a big difference in terms of how much information you're passing on to build the image, and it will make the whole process more efficient and more faster. That's it. I hope you learned something from this. Happy learning. See you. Bye bye.